If you have a strange or scary story you want to share with the channel, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to send it my way. And of course, thank you. Hey Raven, thanks for putting me to sleep. I mean that in the best possible way. My day is made every time I see a new upload, and I try to save them for bedtime, but sometimes the instant gratification monkey in my brain won't allow it, and I devour the episode immediately upon noticing it. Thank you. Addict tendencies aside, here's my story. I grew up in a not-so-functional family. My parents both struggled with addiction, and our family dynamics were strange, although I wouldn't recognize that they weren't normal until I was older. My dad lost his ability to work due to a disabling injury when I was pretty young, so he and my mom ended up staying home rather than working. My mom had always been a better homes and gardens type of mom up until the time of my dad's accident, but lost her ability to keep that whenever he began staying home full-time. He wouldn't allow her to work or even leave the house that often. So, aside from us going to school, we were a fairly reclusive family. The house that we lived in was large and old with its fair share of problems. My parents bought it while my dad was still working and got it at a great price, since the cosmetic facelift didn't fix any of the major issues with the place. Weird things would occasionally happen, like seeing shadow figures or hearing odd noises, some of which we contributed to the rat infestation that had taken over most of the homes in the area. However, some things we couldn't overlook. It always felt like you were being watched, like something dark was looming. I was terrified to get up in the middle of the night and would often run to and from the bathroom only to return to my room and hide under the covers. As time went on, both parents fell deeper into addiction. There was more fighting, more strange occurrences, and the constant presence of overwhelming tension. My dad attempted to take his own life on multiple occasions, something I didn't know until later on. He was in a lot of physical pain, paired with mental instability and a struggle with drug use. One evening, we were all home when he chose to end his life in front of us. I was devastated at first. Of course I was. I was a kid, and the uncertainty of life without one of my parents was more than I could process. Although, as days went on, there was a tremendous reduction in the heavy pressure of our home. As cold-hearted as it may sound, we were experiencing relief for the first time in a long time. My father had been an abusive man. He often spoke of situations that would lead him to become a family annihilator. By his logic, he would rather us die by his doing than by chance. With him gone, the only fear was the fear of uncertainty. While this was an improvement, the paranormal activity reached an all-time high. My mom heard my dad talking to her one night when no one was in the room with her. One morning, we woke up to find a large rectangle cut into the carpet. This was a perfect rectangle. It looked like someone had used a sharp razor to do this. No one had been in our home but my younger sibling, myself, and my mom. One more incident during this same string of events that stands out is the warning. My mom had gone into a room that was rarely opened to do something. Inside, she discovered something that made us all sick to our stomachs. Remember those silicone bracelets with the messages on them that you would get at a school or events? One of us had brought one home after a fire safety presentation and put it in a toy box somewhere because we thought it was too cool to lose. It was a glow-in-the-dark bracelet that said something along the lines of, "When fire strikes, get out and stay out." Well, this bracelet had been stored away for most likely a couple of years at this point, and it had a section cleanly cut from it and left in the middle of the floor in the room. The section of the bracelet that was setting face up for my mom to find said, "Get out." We never found the rest of the bracelet, or found out how this got here. Was this a warning? A threat? A coincidence? If this alone had happened, maybe we could consider it a weird fluke. Unfortunately, paranormal events had become a daily ordeal. We had the house cleansed by several religious figures on different occasions. Things would get a little less active for a bit before picking up again. There was one room you would go in and you would feel like someone was watching you, regardless of the time of day or whether you were alone or not. We frequently experienced a burning sensation in our skin while in this room. We went from seeing shadow figures to decently formed apparitions. A couple of times, these apparitions didn't seem to have ill intent. 95% of the time, whatever these things were seemed to be there to scare us. This house and these events are well behind us now, but we still wonder about the cause of the things that we experienced there. The house is long gone as we knew it, so hopefully no families will experience what we went through there. This is my first time submitting a story, so thank you for reading, and maybe someone else has gone through something similar. This happened to me a long time ago, when I was still in college back in the 70s. I recently started listening to your podcast, and the memory of this inexplicable event came rushing back to me. I was a junior in college at the time, living on the 5th floor of my dorm, which was also the top floor. The wing I lived on was the shortest wing, with only 4 rooms. 2 rooms with an attached bathroom between them on each side of the hallway. I didn't have a roommate this particular semester, and I lived alone in my room. My suite mates were very good friends. Each room had access to the bathroom, which was between the 2 rooms. Each room had a door to the shared bathroom that could be locked with a deadbolt for privacy and security. On this particular day that I'm writing about, my suite mates had already gone to class. I had slept in a little later than normal and got up to go to class around 10 a.m. I want to add that I was alone in my room that morning. I was not then and am not now a smoker, and I didn't have a lighter or matches in my room. No one was in my room when I left for class, and as was my habit, I made sure the bathroom door was deadbolted and my dorm room was locked when I left. I also recall not making my bed that morning, as I awoke late and had to hurry to dress and get to class. When I returned an hour later, I unlocked my room and went in. I immediately noticed the faint smell of smoke. It was odd, and not being a smoker, I couldn't understand why my room smelled of smoke. My friend who lived across the hall were smokers, but they hadn't been in my room. I started to look around for something that might be smoldering. I first went to the electric univent by the window. The univent functioned as a heater, fan, and air conditioner. I thought perhaps it was malfunctioning, but it wasn't even on. Then I checked my desk lamp cord, which was also fine. Finally, I examined my stereo system. It was the 70s, remember, in the attached speakers. Everything was fine. I couldn't find the source of the smoke anywhere. Finally, in desperation, I banged on the door of my friends across the hall. "Something's burning in my room and I can't find it," I said. They jumped up and came across the hall to my room to help me look for the source of the smell of smoke. We all searched the room together, with no results. I have a really keen sense of smell, and began to realize the smell seemed stronger near my bed. My bed was still unmade. My pillow was lying in the middle of the mattress where I had tossed it an hour earlier. The sheets and comforter were kicked off and lying rumpled at the foot of the bed. I reached down and picked up my pillow, and there in the middle of the bed where I had been sleeping an hour earlier was a smoldering fire. My pillow had been covering the charred and burning mattress, and the fire had started to burn into my pillow as well. My friend and I stared incredulously at the hole burning in the middle of my mattress. How could that happen? The mattress was ruined, as was my pillow. The down feathers gave off a putrid, acrid smell. That's what had caught my attention upon entering the room. I was flabbergasted. I had no explanation for how this could have happened. I examined both the mattress and the pillow for any cause, perhaps a match or a cigarette butt, but there was nothing. No explanation to what had caused the spontaneous combustion in the place where I had just been sleeping an hour before. My friends and I scratched our heads and just chalked it up to being one of those things that can't be explained. And that was that for a few days. It bothered me a lot, as it seemed personal and very creepy. How could something like that happen? I had no enemies, no reason for anyone to be upset or angry with me. I certainly hadn't done anything that would warrant my bed and pillow burning. It bugged me for days, to say the least. A few days had passed when one of my friends knocked on my door. I'll call him John. He came in, shutting the door behind him, and said, "I heard your bed burned. Is that true?" I told him yes, it was true. And then he asked me if there was anyone on campus who didn't like me. I told him that the only person who seemed to dislike me was a girl who was currently dating a boy that I had dated 2 years earlier. "What's her name?" he asked. Things were getting weird. I didn't like the way he was acting. I told him the girl's name, and he jumped up and locked the door so no one else would come in. "Listen," he said, "I'm involved with some witchcraft stuff. I'm a warlock, and the girl that you mentioned is a powerful witch." I had never heard anything so bizarre in my life. I was incredulous, and I simply didn't believe him or what he was telling me, but he was dead serious. He said that she had cast some kind of weird energy spell that could light spontaneous fires. To this day, I don't know if that is truly what caused the fire or not, but I have no other explanation for it. And the fact that it was my bed and my pillow strikes me as very weird, personal, and aimed directly at me. I don't know who, what, why, or how this happened. It still haunts me to this day because I cannot rationally explain it. The only thing that makes any sense is the crazy explanation that my friend John gave me, but really? Is that even possible? A long time has passed since then. I still think of this story every once in a while, but I don't speak about it because it creeps me out. But if it was something the girl who dated my old boyfriend did, well, I certainly hope that we never meet again. I've had some creepy experiences myself over the years, but nothing like this one day at my house. I figured I would share it since I've now started listening to this podcast more, and again, thanks for your time. I had bought my house almost 2 years ago from the family of one of my friends, Brian. He lived there and had told me his dad and aunt were planning to sell it. The house was built in 1950 by his grandparents and great-grandparents, and his family has been the only family to live in it. I definitely didn't want to see it bought, tore down, and rebuilt. Plus, I was currently looking to build a house on the land I had bought a few years back, but building supplies were through the roof. Pun intended. Good pun. And I knew that I couldn't just simply swing that kind of project. So I sold my land for $10,000 more than I bought it for. Well done on my part, I do say, and put a good chunk of it down on getting a mortgage for Brian's house. I bought the house as is, so it's been a non-stop project, as everything is very old school and original. No complaints on original, as I've always found things built in the early to mid-1900s or older always hold up longer. Today, it seems everything is built to break in a non-ending money scheme. Anyways, the house needs a lot of work. For 70 years and counting, again, I gotta say Brian's family did an impressive job with this house. But certain things needed to be replaced. The house is quiet, and the neighborhood is the same. Just a bunch of good old country folk on a hill in a small town. The true heart of America, if I may say. But that quiet neighborhood gets weird at night. Another one of my friends, Kevin, grew up on the opposite end of my gravel road. I've known Kevin since we were in 6th grade, and Brian for maybe 5 years total. But since they lived on the same road, Brian knew Kevin a long time as well. Kevin's parents still live in their house today. I've heard from him and Brian that sometimes you'll hear or feel things that might send cold chills down your spine. Another friend that comes over and watches WWE Raw and SmackDown with me, Andrew, has always said that, of all the places I go, walking outside at the end of the wrestling nights gives me the chills. My son lives out of state, and when he came up one time to stay with me in the house after I got it, we had to go back inside at night to grab something before going to stay with my mom on that particular night. He was 14 at the time, and I never told him anything about weird noises or ghosts, as I didn't want to freak him out. I followed him just in case he needed help grabbing things. Not all of the lights work. Again, constant work needs to be done on this house. So he was using his phone light to walk through the living room to the kitchen. He didn't know that I had walked in behind him, and I saw him pause, staring into the corner of the kitchen and slowly looking around, before coming back out with what he needed. I asked him what was that about, and he said, "I don't know. I just felt weird and thought I saw something." I asked what he thought he saw, and he said nothing. There was nothing there. It was more of a feeling, like he could feel that something was there. But his eyes saw nothing. Some nights are fine, but other nights, especially the ones where the moon isn't bright and the darkness is sitting strong on the hill, it has a tendency to make the bravest man's hair stand up. I'm a big guy, and I've always left my doors unlocked growing up. Some nights, it really makes even me feel uneasy. Especially the basement. I don't like the basement. Daytime is fine, but at nights, it's a no-go unless absolutely necessary. The basement floor is the actual earth as it's hand-dug, and no cement laid down. 70 years of dust and dirt make it feel even more offsetting. The best way to describe nighttime is the feeling that you're being watched. Again, the neighborhood is quiet. No crimes, no loud neighbors. A lot of older couples and families that have lived their whole lives on this hill. My neighbor is coming up on 90. Everyone's nice and helpful, and at the end of the day, everyone is armed anyway. So, definitely no need to be scared. But at night, it just feels like something is present. And it just doesn't sit right with me sometimes. I've heard about skin crawlers and all that. Kevin has mentioned shadow people chasing him as a kid before his house had plumbing, and they had an outhouse. He hated using the bathroom because he said he would sprint all the way to the doors after he went. Waking up, occasionally seeing a shadow that he couldn't explain. Just eerie stuff, you know? Weird and unexplainable. But nothing really violent. I preface all this because nighttime is when all the weird feelings and occasional noises happen. Daytime is calm and peaceful. This particular day, I had called a local electrical, plumbing, HVAC company to come out to the house and give me an estimate on work that needed to be done. They separate their workers depending on jobs, so I was to expect a plumber and then 30 minutes later an electrician, both from the same company. The plumber, Dietrich, arrived around 3 p.m. He was a big fella like me, and told me to just call him D. We chatted it up while he walked through the house and inspected all the plumbing. He started upstairs and ended with the basement. I told him an electrician was coming too from his company and that he may get blocked in the driveway. He said that it was no problem and asked if I knew which electrician. All I knew was the man's name was Rusty, because the message I got said that I could expect Rusty at around 3:30 p.m. He laughed and said, good old Russell. Obviously, he knew who I was talking about. He's a cool little guy, he said as he kept looking around. Sure enough, once he was close to being done, the electrician, Rusty, got there but pulled up in front along the road in order to not block his coworker's van. Dee came out with me and a short Italian man hopped out, and it was like two old friends seeing each other again, chatting about the long drives in between stops that they had been and where they were going next. They talked for a moment, and Dee had his estimate ready for me to sign. Rusty said, "Well, I guess it's my turn," and started looking around. Dee joined us as Rusty also started upstairs and then made his way to the basement to finish. At this point, all three of us are in the basement. I'm leaned up against the washer listening to Rusty and Dee joke back and forth about how ridiculous some of the runs they go on are. "It sounds to me like you guys don't get paid enough for what you go through," I said. They both laugh and they say it all depends. Other than our conversation, it's pretty quiet in the house when, all of a sudden, the back screen door slams upstairs. We all pause, and I'm like, damn ghosts. Really, I was just trying to clear the weird pause. We all laugh, and the topic turns to weird stories. Things that we've all heard before, like noises and stuff. Rusty says he's heard some things in a few old houses he's worked on, but that he pays them no mind. "It's always the old houses," said Rusty. It was windy, so I said, "Yeah, the back screen door doesn't always close, so sometimes it stays partially open until the wind makes it close abruptly." About 5 minutes go by. Rusty is examining the power box, Dee's in front of me, and I'm leaned against the washer still when someone with boots walks slowly from the living room upstairs to the kitchen. I say boots because it was so clearly the sound of a sturdy heel-to-foot step that's made with old cowboy boots. Not the ones with spurs or nothing like that. Just a firm foot-to-floor sound. About 7, maybe 8 steps total. Dee is looking directly at me, and I smile and say, "Did you hear that?" I had thought to myself that I was crazy, but it was so clear that it paused the conversation. Obviously, unless I'm losing my mind and hearing stuff, there's no possible way they both didn't hear that. Dee chuckled and said, Yeah, dude, someone's upstairs. Didn't you say you live alone?" I had a roommate previously, but not anymore. My dog was shut in my room, but it wasn't her knocking something over or her little dog feet. Again, this was clear boots-to-floor sounding steps. I was like, "Nah, man, nobody else is here except my dog." It sounded like someone with boots. Honestly, I only said that because I personally just wanted confirmation. Rusty spoke up and said, "Yeah, that definitely sounded like boots." Rusty speaking up meant that all three of us clearly heard someone walk right above us from the living room to kitchen. I said, "Hold up, let me check." I walked upstairs and yelled pretty loudly, "Yo," in an attempt to see if maybe Andrew or Kevin had come by. Neither ever wore boots, both were the skater/athletic type guys, so their shoes were either Vans or Nike. But at this point, I just wanted answers and was praying that they decided to cowboy up and just show up. But once I came upstairs, there was nothing. Nobody. I said, "Yo," another 2 separate times as I walked around and even looked outside. Not a trace of anyone. The house seemed quieter than normal. Just a slight whimper of my dog, Maui, wanting out. I went ahead and I let her out just so that there could be no more possible noises that were unexplainable. She may be a smaller dog, a Patterdale Terrier, but she could be fierce when she wanted to be. Letting her out made me feel a little less unnerved. I went back downstairs and laughed to the guys like, "Nah, there's nobody here, for real." Honestly, if it was just me, I would have thought I was crazy, but Both the guys heard it clear as day. 1 foot at a time, 7 to 8 steps, starting in the living room over to the kitchen. The sound even changed pitch slightly from living room rug to kitchen tile. You could tell where the steps were as whoever or whatever it was walked. Obviously boots. Rusty joked and said, "Well, all I know is I just gotta outrun you two big boys." We all laughed, and it eased the tension a bit, but especially D. I could tell that it got to him. He stayed while Rusty finished up, but this whole mood changed. He was right in front of me when it happened, and our eyes locked as it was happening. Rusty was maybe 10 feet away at the power box. Let me remind everyone that this was now around 4 p.m. in the day. Broad daylight, sun shining outside, warm late spring day. I think it was in late April, maybe early May. 3 grown men all trying to wrap our minds around what had just happened. Once they left, I called Brian. I remember him saying one time that he thought maybe his grandpa still hung around spirit-wise. I thought he was just full of crap. I said, "Hey, sorry, this is random," but then I asked him if his grandpa wore boots. He was like, "What? Why?" I said, "Just answer me, man." I tried to act normal, but I'm sure he picked up on my nerves and was like, "Yeah, man, all the time. Pretty much all he ever wore except for his house slippers on Sundays and rest days." I paused, and then I told him what had happened. He wasn't in front of me, but I could just hear in his voice that he was smiling. Maybe he just said this to calm his friend down, but in honesty, he sounded very serious and sincere. He said, "No worries, man. Grandpa was probably just going to get a cup of water from the kitchen. You're in good company. He wouldn't ever harm you." This story is 100% true. I spent the next week at my mom's, and it took me a while to get used to being at my house, especially at night. I still don't like going outside or into the basement unless I need to. Although I never felt in danger, it was just weird noises from time to time. Brian explaining to me about his grandpa made me feel less spooked. Some nights, I would be up playing a game on my PS5 or watching a show, and I would hear a noise. At this point, I just chuckle and say out loud, "Go to sleep, Grandpa. Everything's all good." Hi, Raven. Greetings from the UK. I've been umming and ahhing about submitting this, but I was talking to a friend about it when it happened recently, and they said that I should share the full thing, so here we go. For pretty much all of my life, I've been able to hear things that aren't there, and sort of modify things that have happened. Nothing on a huge scale, just tiny things like I cracked my husband's favorite glass. Didn't want to admit it, so I just popped it back into the cupboard and imagined it being used and unbroken. And then he used it the next day and there was no crack. It was fine. I had a set of work keys in my pocket, and as I pulled my phone out of my pocket, what sounded like and felt like the keys came to, and I heard them and saw them just as they slipped down the drain in the street. I imagined them in the center console of my car. I hadn't even been in my car since having the keys on me, and then later that day, when I got in my car, in the center console were the keys. These are just a couple of examples, and when I lost the keys, I had a work friend with me, who, when I showed her that I had found the keys in my car, was obviously super confused. I explained how these things happen fairly regularly, and she suggested I tell my story to you. As I say, this does happen fairly regularly, and is unintentional, so if I try to actively imagine a scenario, it doesn't come to pass. But when the image sort of pops into my head, then generally it does. Now, I'm not sure if this is connected, but I also hear a voice sometimes. I know this is why maybe I'm just balmy. The voice is like a hoarse whisper, and it really creeps me out. I was hoovering the stairs once, and I clearly heard the voice in my ear say my name. It scared me, so I turned off the hoover and all was silent for a couple of seconds until my phone started ringing downstairs, which I wouldn't have heard had the hoover been on. It was a phone call from my husband who had been on a tour, military, and had no access to a phone regularly. He could only call me from a satellite phone at random times. This was the first time I had spoken to him in over a week. The other week, I heard it say rainbow, like a murmur. Later on, I went to check on the kids, and their fairy lights in their rooms were flashing multicolored. We only ever keep them on a timer, and on static, warm white. The kids are scared of the dark. I logically thought the kids must have been playing with the lights, not that they ever have before, but it's the only logical explanation. But when I tried to change the lights back to white, there were no batteries in the remote. We had taken them out to use in one of the kids' toys a week before. The most memorable time I heard the voice was the 7th of July of 2005. I was at Aldgate Station, going to surprise my husband at his barracks. This was before we were married. It was around 8:30 in the morning when I heard the voice say, "Boo," in a creepy whisper. It scared me, but I thought maybe it was just the sounds of the station. I decided I needed to call my husband to let him know I was coming, so I went out to call him. He turned out not to be at the barracks, and was at my flat. I walked home. Just look up the date and the station. Maybe if the voice didn't say boo, I would have been either on a train or at the station when the London bombings took place. I was very, very lucky. A few years ago, we went on a walk around some castle grounds, and my daughter wanted to chase the geese. I was telling her not to because they might fly at my son who was in a pushchair, and as I was telling her not to, I heard the voice say, "Go on then." I ignored it, but within 15 minutes, a goose flew at me whilst I was pushing the pram, and cut my cheek. I managed to catch the voice on video whilst I was telling my daughter to not chase them. I could send the video if you would like to hear it. I forgot to mention that because of the goose flying at me, both of my children were screaming fits, and I decided it was time to go home. Not stop and stay another hour for lunch. Just after lunchtime, when we would have been driving home, there was a huge car crash, and a traffic jam that lasted for hours, which we would have ended up in had we not left early. I also often hear boots walking about upstairs. We live in a 300-year-old coach house which is detached, but there's no one home. Constant clicking noises, which sound like the light switches being turned on or off. Never any changes to the lights, though, and it often sounds like someone is walking up and down our hallway. It always gives me an uneasy, uncomfortable feeling. So, am I haunted? Do I have a guardian angel? Some kind of superpowers? I don't know. I know that what I hear scares me and doesn't give me a good vibe, but the things that happen are usually to my benefit in some way. I would love to hear your thoughts, and thanks for reading. This story is the absolute truth. I was about 5 when I saw it for the first time. The first neighborhood I lived in had a small ditch to it. They were digging it up for God knows what, but it was fun to play in. One night, it was a little darker than usual. I was getting ready to head home when I came across a human bone. The innocent 5-year-old me thought that it was a dinosaur bone, because it had been sticking out of the ground. Thinking back to later on, I realized that I almost touched a human femur. I think I mentioned this because it just didn't seem right. But anyway, that night I had a nightmare of something running by the edge of the highway in our canyon. It was keeping up with the car I was in, and then eventually stopped and looked at me and smiled. It was almost human, but it was paler and seemed iridescent. The image of this person scared me so bad that I woke up in a cold sweat. I looked outside thinking I would see her, but I didn't, luckily. Oh yes, this figure did look female. There was just something about her that extremely put me off. But as a 5-year-old, I moved on pretty quickly. And then the next time I saw her wasn't until I was 10. I was going through the canyon with my friends on the way back, when one of the girls tells me to look out the window. I think I started tearing up when I saw it, this thing. Whatever it was could harm me so easily. And then it played the same dream sequence. It stopped right before a bridge, and this time I saw her full face. Her smile was wicked and full of anger. Her eyes were black, teeth were crooked. She looked almost as if she had been a pioneer woman that had been wronged. I couldn't bear it much longer, and then she vanished. She showed up again when my mom opened her shop. For a bit of background, our town was big on smuggling in its early development, so they created a tunnel system from the train station to my high school. My mom's bakery was formerly a hotel, where 3 kids went missing, a man was murdered, and a couple other things. But it was just a place where ghosts felt welcome. My parents were very ignorant to them, but I felt them every time I went in the basement. I spent most of my time in the basement because it was so interesting for me. Of course, a 13-year-old me was trying to understand the other side. I never felt unsafe or in danger until one day when I was messing around with my brother's friend. We had turned off all the lights and used just my flashlight on my phone. Each room of the basement had a different vibe, the back room being the most confusing. When we had reached the back room, I turned my flashlight to him. Behind his shadow, there was a woman's figure, dark, but you could tell it was there. He saw the fear in my eyes, and we both darted for the stairs. For some reason, I could tell that it was her. I know it wanted to hurt me. If I had stayed any longer, it would have grabbed both of us. Flash forward to last year, I'm 14, turning 15, and me, my boyfriend, and his parents had gone out to the countryside to go stargazing. There was this parking lot, surrounded by trees, and that was where we stopped. When it became dark, I looked out into the woods. I felt her presence again. She wasn't coming for me, but I knew that she was there and she was frustrated. I don't know how I knew, but I knew. I shrugged it off, but this feeling became stronger, like she was closer. Just as it was time to leave, I looked in a direction that I hadn't seen before and felt like I saw her, just on the edge of the trees. I wasn't sure of this last time, because she didn't form the way she usually did. I know this isn't the last of her, but that's all that I can share for now, so thanks, Raven. Hey Raven, this happened to me when I was a kid, about 7 years old. In 1983, around the first week of school in early September, I had been outside playing with a baseball and throwing it around when it went into the road and started rolling down the street in between cars. I chased it for a bit before running in front of a car and having the car lock the brakes up, almost hitting me. Scared, I gave up chasing it and ran back to my house as quickly as possible. As I arrived back to the house, I hear a voice calling my name from behind me, and there stood the mom of a friend who lived up the road holding my ball. I remember grabbing the ball from her and going inside the house to tell my mom what just happened. This is where it gets strange. This was 1983, and the mom who had just handed me the ball had been out of the country and on a flight. My mom knew this because my friend up the street was being watched by the grandparents while his mom was away. That night on the news, we find out that a plane Korean Airlines Flight 007 was shot down, and all the passengers on the plane were killed. My friend up the street, his mom was on that plane. I'm trying to make sense of this even years later, as I know that it was my mom's friend who handed me that ball after I ran out in front of a car. I still remember the image of her standing at the end of my driveway and calling my name, holding my ball, but how could it have been her if she had died in a plane crash that day? I'm 48 years old now, and I still remember all this like it was yesterday. So that, my friends, was a collection of some creepy, chilling, eerie, whatever you want to say, whatever description you want to use for these stories, paranormal stories. They were some chilling paranormal stories. Creepy. These ones actually were kind of creepy. Some good ones in this collection, too, so. Yeah. Hopefully, you all enjoyed this collection of stories. Now, I want to take a moment in this outro, just carve out a couple seconds here, to mention that I've been getting a few messages from people asking if I'm doing okay. I think it came about because I mentioned being tired in my posts the other day. I want to let you all know that I'm doing fine. I am okay. I am honestly okay. I know the boundaries to which I can push myself. I understand the signs that my body will give me if I need to take a break. And I'm not overdoing it too much. I am pushing myself a little extra, yes, because I want to get more out. I didn't get to do what I wanted to do in October, so I'm doing it now in November. My original intent was to do second half of October, first half of November as daily content, to kind of split it over 2 months, because I knew that in October, everyone and their, brother that was a narrator was going to be doing daily content, and I didn't want to be part of that oversaturation. I would be at the end, obviously, near Halloween, but I wanted to also kind of like stretch it. So whenever everyone's like, hey, we're taking a break now that it's November. No. Raven doesn't take that break. Raven pushes it, keeps going. But it didn't quite play out like I wanted it to, and that's totally okay. That's the good thing about doing this is my schedule can be whatever I make it. Back to the point here. I just want to let you guys know I'm fine. I am physically okay. If I hit a point where I feel like I need to stop, I will stop. Okay? I really do appreciate all the concern. It really does mean a lot to me, and I'm very grateful to have all of you out there, being considerate and concerned, and that's why I consider you guys to be my friends, because, random people on the internet wouldn't just check in and say, hey, are you okay? So, yeah. Again, thank you to all of you. I'm fine, okay? I promise. Yeah. All that said, friends, hopefully you enjoyed these stories. If you did, please do hit the like button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing. You can also leave me a comment down below with your thoughts and how you're doing. Are you guys okay? That matters to me as well, so, yeah. You can join Patreon or memberships to get early access to content like this, or other things, depending on what you sign up for. Do a super thanks, which is a tip to the channel. Buy a signed poster from the coffee link, that's KOFI, down in the description below. There are 3 designs. I sign any one you purchase. You can listen elsewhere, such as Spotify, Audible, Pandora, Apple Podcasts. Same content, but presented in a different way. And I think that's everything. One of these days, I'm going to write a little list of the things I need to say, so I can just kind of check down it as I do my outros. But until then, it's funnier this way, because I forget a lot. Anyways, hopefully you're doing well. Hope I see you again here very soon. Until then, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until next time, my friends, much love, and sleep well.